30 minutes from Hobart's city waterfront, past the last road sign, past the last trail marker, deep in bush that has not been properly surveyed in generations. People keep finding things that should not be there. Stone platforms arranged with geometric precision, walls built without mortar, without written record, without any clear purpose, chambers sunk into hillsides where no settlement was ever formally documented. Some of these structures appear to be colonial, some appear to be far older, and a few of them remain genuinely unexplained by any historian, archaeologist, or geologist who has visited them. Tasmania is one of the most isolated landmasses on this planet. For at least 65,000 years before European contact, this island was home to one of the most sophisticated and adaptive cultures in human history. The Palawa people knew this landscape intimately. They shaped it, navigated it, and built within it across a span of time that makes the colonial era look like a footnote. Then, in 1803, the British arrived. What followed was documented in painful detail. But what existed before the documentation, and what was built before the settlers mapped the land, is still being slowly uncovered in the bush around Hobart, one stone at a time. These are 12 ancient structures in the Tasmanian bush that no one has been able to fully explain. If this is the kind of content that interests you, subscribe now and hit the bell icon. We cover the hidden history of Australian places that most channels never touch. Leave a comment below telling us which of these 12 structures surprises you most. Now let us get into it. Number 1. The Recherche Bay stone platforms, far south Tasmania. At the very bottom of Tasmania, where the road runs out and the Southern Ocean begins, lies Recherche Bay. In 1792, French explorer Bruny Island anchored his 2 ships here and made one of the most documented early contacts between Europeans and Tasmanian Aboriginal people. His crew established vegetable gardens, took astronomical measurements, and remained for several weeks. The written French record of this visit is detailed and well preserved. What the French record does not explain are the stone platforms found scattered across the headlands above the bay. These flat, deliberately leveled stone surfaces range between 3 and 8 meters across. They sit on high ground with clear sightlines to the water. They are not convict-era construction. They predate any formal British settlement in this region. Archaeological teams who have visited Recherche Bay confirm the platforms show evidence of deliberate construction, but the purpose has never been resolved. Palawa cultural knowledge attached to this specific area was largely disrupted during the conflict period of the 1820s and 1830s. What community knowledge survives does not describe these platforms in detail. They may have served as ceremonial gathering points. They may have been used for fire signaling across the water. Or they may represent something older still, a use of elevated stone that does not map neatly onto any documented purpose. Recherche Bay is accessible by gravel road, but most of these platforms require a serious bushwalk to reach. The platforms are still there. No one has offered a conclusive explanation. Number 2. The Huon Valley drystone walls, Lower Huon region. South of Hobart, where the Huon River winds through deep valley country, farmers and bushwalkers have been encountering dry stone walls for well over a century. Some of these walls are straightforward. They mark old property boundaries. They were built by convict labour or early free settlers from the 1830s onward. That story is well documented. But there is another set of walls in the Huon region that does not fit that story at all. These structures run through sections of bush that were never formally settled. Some of them extend for hundreds of meters through terrain that would have required enormous labour to clear, let alone wall. Several sections run perpendicular to any logical property boundary, cutting across hills rather than following ridgelines or creek beds the way a practical farmer would build. Local historians have debated these walls for decades. One theory holds that they were built by early illegal settlers, escaped convicts who farmed small plots in the valley without official sanction. Another theory points to pre-colonial Aboriginal land management, the deliberate reshaping of country through stone to guide animal movement or manage vegetation. A third theory, less popular among mainstream historians but persistent in local conversation, is that some of these walls predate European contact entirely. No excavation has been conducted along the most anomalous sections. The walls continue to divide opinion in the region, and in the most literal sense, they continue to divide the bush. They are worth investigating before more sections disappear beneath the undergrowth unrecorded. Number 3. The Wellington Range Cairn Network, Kunanyi, southeast Tasmania. The mountain that dominates Hobart's skyline is called Kunanyi by the Muwinina people and Mount Wellington by the city below it. Most visitors who reach the summit notice the wind towers, the telecommunications infrastructure, and on a clear day, the full sweep of the Derwent estuary. What most visitors do not notice are the cairns. Scattered across the Wellington Range at elevations between 800 and 1200 metres, there is a network of stone cairns that has never been formally mapped or catalogued. These are not the small rock stacks that hikers leave on popular trails. Many of them stand over a metre tall. Several appear to align with one another across sightlines of several kilometres. At least 3 sit at positions that, on specific calendar dates, align with the sunrise or sunset over prominent coastal landmarks. The standard explanation is that these are surveyors' cairns from the 19th century colonial mapping expeditions. Some of them certainly are, but a number of the cairns show weathering patterns inconsistent with 19th century construction, and at least 2 sit at positions that no surveying record from that era mentions. Palawa oral tradition regarding Kunanyi was largely disrupted during the Black War period. What fragments survive suggest the mountain was a significant ceremonial site. Whether these cairns form part of that ceremonial landscape remains an open and poorly resourced question for researchers. The ones that no survey record can account for are the reason this ridge keeps drawing people back. Number 4. The South Arm Peninsula Platform Stones, Eastern Shore. The South Arm Peninsula reaches southward from Hobart's eastern shore into the mouth of the Derwent River. It is a dry, windswept landscape of eucalyptus scrub and dolerite outcrops. Most visitors come for the lighthouse or the ocean views. Researchers have come for something else. Across the tip of the South Arm Peninsula, there is a series of large flat dolerite stones that have been moved and positioned in ways their natural geology does not explain. Dolerite is the dominant rock of southern Tasmania, fracturing into distinctive columns and sheets under natural conditions. But the stones at South Arm have been arranged into low platforms and shallow enclosures that do not match any natural fracture pattern. Several are positioned so that they create sheltered spaces facing north, catching maximum winter sun. The most obvious interpretation is that these are old shelter structures built by Aboriginal people during the thousands of years they occupied this coastline. That is almost certainly correct in broad terms. What is more difficult to answer is the specific age of the arrangements and the purpose of the larger platforms, which are too exposed and too open to have served as simple windbreaks. Colonial records mention no structures at South Arm before the lighthouse was established. The platforms were simply always there, noted occasionally in passing by surveyors and early settlers, and never formally investigated. Number 5. The Coal River Valley Rock Alignments, Richmond Region. The Coal River Valley, east of Hobart, is famous for Richmond Bridge, one of the oldest intact bridges in Australia, built by convict labour in the 1820s. Tourists photograph the bridge and drive home, but in the bush on the valley slopes above the river, there are stone alignments that raise more interesting questions than any convict-built bridge. These alignments consist of stones placed in rough rows, some extending for 20 to 40 metres across the slope face. They are not retaining walls because the slope here is gradual and no agriculture is being supported. They are not drainage works because they run across rather than down the slope. They are not fence lines because no post holes or post remnants have been found in association with them. Local folklore in the Richmond area has attached several explanations to these alignments over the years, including boundary markers for Aboriginal territorial divisions, ritual pathways connected to ceremonial activity, and most colourfully, evidence of a pre-colonial settlement of unknown origin. That last theory is not supported by any physical evidence, but the first two remain plausible and unresolved. A formal archaeological survey of the valley slopes has never been conducted. The alignments sit on private farmland, which limits access and research. They are photographed by the occasional curious visitor, and largely left to accumulate another layer of unexplained history. Number 6. The Tasman Peninsula Sea Cave Engravings, Waterfall Bay. The Tasman Peninsula southeast of Hobart is a landscape of extraordinary coastal geology. Dolerite columns rise 300 metres from the sea. Blowholes, sea caves, and natural arches line the cliff base. Most visitors experience this coastline from the cliff tops along the Three Capes track. What lies at water level is far less visited and in certain places, far stranger. At the base of the Tasman Arch and at several sea cave entrances near Waterfall Bay, there are geometric engravings cut into the dolerite rock face. These are not pictographs of animals or human figures. They are patterns. Repeated lines, intersecting angles, and circular arrangements carved at depths that would have required the carver to work at low tide or from a small watercraft. Tasmanian rock art is rare and poorly documented compared to mainland Australia. The Palawa people's artistic traditions were largely conducted on organic materials that have not survived. That makes these engravings unusually significant, but no successful dating has been completed on the sea cave engravings, and the meaning of geometric engraving traditions in this specific region is not established in any published literature. Whether these carvings are ceremonial, navigational, territorial, or something else entirely is an open question. The caves are accessible only by sea kayak or by descending ropes from the cliff tops. Most researchers who know about them have not been able to reach them. The carvings required patience, technical skill, and a clear sense of purpose. Someone chose this specific location deliberately. The ocean keeps its own record. Number 7. The Midlands Sandstone Chamber, between Hobart and Bothwell. In the central Tasmanian Midlands, in dry country between the capital and the historic township of Bothwell, someone built a sandstone chamber. It sits on a slight rise above a dry creek bed. 3 sides are formed from stacked sandstone blocks. The 4th side is open, facing east. A large capstone sits across the top, creating a roofed interior roughly 2 meters wide and 1.5 meters deep. This structure is not unique. Several similar chambers exist in the Midlands, and comparable structures have been noted in parts of Victoria and South Australia. The debate around all of them follows similar lines. Convict-era shepherds built roofed shelters from available stone when tending flocks in remote country. That explanation is practical and accounts for most such structures. But the Midlands Chamber near Bothwell has features that make the shepherd theory difficult to sustain. The interior is too small and too low for comfortable adult use. The entrance orientation is consistent with astronomical alignment, and the chamber sits well away from any documented grazing run of the colonial period. No one has definitively resolved what this chamber was built for or who built it. It appears on no heritage registry and receives no formal protection. Cattle in the surrounding paddock have displaced some of the upper stonework over the years. If someone does not formally investigate it within the next decade, the question will become unanswerable by default. Number 8. The Bruny Island Stone Fish Traps, South Bruny. Bruny Island sits in the D'Entrecasteaux Channel south of Hobart, and its southern tip is one of the most remote and ecologically intact parts of the state. The island is most familiar to visitors for its cheese, its little penguins, and the sandy neck connecting its 2 halves. Less known are the stone fish traps along the tidal shoreline of South Bruny. These fish traps are constructed from stones arranged into semicircular enclosures that open toward the water at high tide and trap fish as the tide drops. Aboriginal fish trap technology is well documented in parts of Australia, most famously at Brewarina in New South Wales, where stone traps have been in continuous use for an estimated 40,000 years. The Bruny Island traps have not been formally dated. Some are clearly maintained and were in active use well into the 19th century. Others are larger, more complex, and sit in positions that suggest a much longer history. What makes the South Bruny traps difficult to explain in simple terms is their scale. Several of the enclosures required coordination across large tidal areas. The stone used was transported from sources some distance away. The engineering logic of certain sections implies knowledge accumulated over many generations, rather than structures improvised by individuals. The traps have received minimal formal study. They are frequently mistaken for natural rock formations by kayakers passing along the shore. They may be one of the most significant and least studied examples of Aboriginal engineering in Tasmania. Number 9. The Weld Wilderness Stone Enclosure, Southwest Tasmania. The Weld Valley in southwest Tasmania is one of the most inaccessible areas of the state. Old-growth Huon pine, horizontal scrub that can take hours to move through per kilometre, difficult river crossings, and total absence of mobile reception make it a place that very few people visit without a specific purpose. Forestry contractors working at the fringes of the Weld region in the 1990s reported encountering a stone enclosure deep in the bush. The structure was described as roughly circular, built from stacked flat stones, approximately 6 meters in diameter. The wall stood to about waist height. A gap in the south side functioned as an entrance. No organic material was found inside the enclosure that could be carbon dated. Photographs were taken at the time, but have not appeared in any formal research context. The location was reported to local heritage officers, but no follow-up investigation has been publicly documented. Given the difficulty of access and the cost of mounting a formal expedition into the Weld, this is not surprising. The contractors described the enclosure as clearly man-made and clearly old, based upon the degree of lichen coverage and the stability of the stacked stonework. Whether it represents a Palawa ceremonial site, an early colonial structure of some unexpected type, or something that does not fit either category remains unknown. The Weld does not give up its secrets easily. Number 10. The Derwent Valley Terrace Walls, Ellendale region. In the Derwent Valley northwest of Hobart, around the small community of Ellendale, the hillsides carry a series of stone terrace walls that local farmers have known about for at least 100 years. Unlike the Huon walls further south, these terraces sit in country that was eventually farmed, which complicates the question of their origin. Some could be convict-era land clearing, but not all of them. Several terrace sections appear to predate the earliest documented land grants in this part of the valley. One continuous terrace runs for over 300 meters along a hillside contour through country that appears in no colonial land record as having been improved or cleared. The stone in these sections has been dressed, meaning deliberately shaped, in a manner that matches pre-colonial Aboriginal stoneworking techniques, rather than convict-era construction methods. These terraces were flagged to the Tasmanian Heritage Council in the early 2000s. Funding for formal investigation was not secured. They remain on private land with no heritage listing. A local historical society has documented them in photographs and basic survey notes, which represent the most complete record that currently exists. These are not dramatic monoliths or mysterious chambers. They are quiet, careful work in stone, laid by someone whose identity we cannot confirm and whose tools we have never recovered. Number 11. The Forestier Peninsula Foundation Grid near Taranaki. The Forestier Peninsula connects to the Tasman Peninsula via a narrow isthmus at Dunalley. Visitors pass through it on the drive to Port Arthur without stopping, but in the bush inland from the main road, in scrub that receives almost no foot traffic, there is a pattern of stone foundations that does not correspond to any known colonial building or settlement. These foundations form a rough grid. The stone lines are low, mostly ankle height, but consistent enough in their spacing and right angle orientation to be clearly intentional. The grid covers an area of roughly 40 by 60 meters. Several sections show evidence of post holes, suggesting timber superstructure once stood above the stone lines. But no record in the Port Arthur Convict Archive, no colonial land survey, and no local historical document mentions a building or encampment at this location. The most direct explanation is that this is an informal convict-era structure, a temporary work camp or station built and used without formal documentation, then abandoned. That is plausible in a penal colony where off-the-record activity was common. But the grid dimensions and the internal spacing of its divisions do not match building conventions documented for any known convict construction type. No one has examined this site closely enough to give a confident answer, and currently, no one is funded to try. Number 12. The Cockle Creek Boundary Stones, Australia's southernmost road. Cockle Creek, at the end of the Huon Highway, is the southernmost point in Australia accessible by sealed road. Beyond it, the South Coast Track begins, one of the most demanding wilderness walks on the continent. Most people who drive to Cockle Creek take a photograph at the road's end and turn around. Those who walk further along the shoreline, past the bay and into the low scrub at the base of the Arthur Range, encounter a series of standing stones. These are not natural dolerite columns, which are common in this region and easily recognized by their geometry. These stones have been roughly shaped and placed upright in the ground at positions forming a loose line along a consistent compass bearing. The line runs inland from the coast at an angle pointing toward a prominent pass in the Arthur Range. Convict-era boundary markers do not match this description. The colonial administration used different materials and formally recorded boundary points. These stones appear in no official survey. Palawa presence at this part of the far south was significant and long-standing, spanning thousands of years across the coastal country. The stones may represent territorial or ceremonial markers placed across a very long period. But no formal study has been conducted, and the community knowledge that might clarify their purpose has never been captured in any public record. They stand in the bush at the bottom of Australia, pointing toward a mountain pass, and no one can say with certainty who placed them there or why. Tasmania holds more unanswered questions per square kilometre than almost any other Australian state. The combination of extreme depth in its Indigenous occupation, a catastrophic disruption of that cultural record during the colonial period, and vast areas of bush that remain formally unsurveyed means structures like these 12 will keep appearing. Some will receive formal investigation and be explained. Others will deteriorate before anyone looks at them closely enough to find out what they were.